Alrighty. Well, Taylor, you have a story that you're working on, right? After
Yeah.
Olive.
Yes, that's it.
And I love the way that you're doing it. You're doing it through a blog, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So you do like, do you do like a chapter a week? Like, how are you working that?
So it's really interesting because every single year I participate in National Novel Writing Month every November. And so I always find that it's a super great way to get the creative juices flowing and to keep you writing. And especially during COVID this year,
Oh,
it was
yes.
a really great opportunity to stay creative while being stuck in the house all the time. And so after writing the bulk of the novel, which is now done, I'm slowly working through and editing it bit by bit. And with most of my works that come out of National Novel Writing Month, I normally think if I'm interested in seeking publication, whether it's self-publishing or professional publishing in the future, this is kind of my draft copy. Like, this is my copy that I can kind of see what people think and see what points people like and don't like. So ever since then, my normal process for releasing a novel is that after I've edited normally at least a chunk of the novel, I start releasing it week by week on Wattpad. I'll release one chapter. It's normally every Friday, while I'm finishing the remainder of the novel, because National Novel Writing Month, I'm able to finish most of it, but I normally have some things that I want to add on to come at the end of the month. So it's as I'm finishing it up, I'll start uploading it online. And I find that it's a really great way to get people engaged throughout the story, especially because when I'm releasing books like After Olive that are very focused on like mystery centric things, it's really great to see people comment on the suspense or what they think is happening as they're releasing chapters each week. Because as a writer, it's really great to see, okay, at this point in the novel, what are my readers thinking when they absolutely can't know anything else? So it's been a super fun process, and it's definitely been keeping me busy during this time.
It's an amazing process. I mean, I had thought about doing something like that a while back, but I think I'm still at that stage where it's not perfect yet, and I'm not ready to let everybody see it yet. But
Oh yeah, I
the way that
absolutely
you
get
do it,
that.
you release the chapters after you've edited them and
Yeah.
revised them and whatnot.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh man, I
but
absolutely feel that though, because I mean, the first time I started uploading works online, it was like my first year of university, is when, like, very last year of high school going into first year of university. And honestly, it was because I knew that I wanted to write for a living. And it was like, this would be a really great way to get some practice and to get some feedback, or if anything, to develop a following for if one day I decide to
right.
release something. So I remember being so nervous to hit publish on my first one. Like, oh my God, I have no idea what people are going to think. Are they going to like it? Are they going to hate it? And then it's so liberating to just kind of get it out into the world. Like, regardless of what people think, having it out there is so great, because you know that you made that entire thing. Like, you crafted the idea, you created it, you made it into a thing, and now other people are consuming it. Regardless if they have thoughts on your thing, which is exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that's more of the nervous part than the exciting part. The comments
Oh yeah.
when people are putting their thoughts up there. I mean, granted, you can't please everybody,
Hmm.
but you still have to be in the right mindset to take that constructive criticism
Oh
when
yeah.
putting your work out there. But I thought that that was an amazing process, the way that you do it and the way
Thank
that
you.
you release a chapter every week. It's like using beta readers, but taking it to a whole new level.
Yeah, it's honestly been super fun too, because I love being able to. I think one of the best parts about Wattpad, I miss it now because obviously it doesn't have it anymore, were the community tabs, the forums where you're able to speak with writers and discuss things. And so now I find that obviously the comment section of books is where most of the community building happens. And it's super wonderful. I think it's a great community for writers, who, professional and amateur writers alike, to grow and to practice their skills and to share their stuff, because that's exactly it. I view it as like, oh, I'm getting beta readers. It's like free people who just want to read your work and like get involved with it. It's super fun.
But also, like you said before, it's a good way of developing a following of people who have already read your work and already know that they love your work, to be able to convert that to sales when you do publish your work.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So what is the story about?
So after Olive, it's a story that I've been kind of tinkering with for the past year, because last year, I guess that means National Novel Writing Month 2019, not 2020. I'd worked on a novel, and it wasn't that I didn't like the idea, it was just I need a lot more work on this before I'm ready to put that out. So I didn't end up releasing it. I kind of had a year gap where I didn't release anything. And now, after writing this one for National Novel Writing Month, I've had all of this extra time where I'm not working or editing on another project to kind of think of this one. So the premise of After Olive is, obviously my main character's name is Olive, and she heads to New York in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic in order to look for her mom. She receives a letter in the mail one day that's addressed from her mother, who's been gone for 15 years. And it says, like, I came to New York. That was the reason I had to leave you and the family behind. This is my address. You can come and visit me and we can talk more. So obviously, it's the middle of a pandemic. She drops absolutely everything to go. She risks a lot to get there. And then once she arrives, her mother isn't at the address. And the people who live there say that they've lived there for years and they have no idea what this girl is talking about. So it's kind of, where do you go from there, especially in a pandemic setting? You know, where do you go from there? And it focuses a lot on the bond that, in the midst of, I don't want to say tragedy, but in the midst of, you know, chaos in the world, people still kind of come together to help each other. Even if you don't know anything about other people, you just kind of want to help other people for no personal gain, which is a big portion of the novel. It's a big, like, I don't want to say character arc, but it's a big focus of Olive's journey, is to figure out why people are helping her to get no gain, because she can't
It's kind of
fathom
like
that.
the main theme.
Yeah, exactly. I think that especially now, it's a really interesting theme to explore, the idea of people are helping me and they gain absolutely nothing in a time when the world is so scary and uncertain. And I just think it's fascinating to go, okay, well, why? Why are you helping me? You gain nothing. You are sacrificing something to help me, whether it be time or resources. And why is that? And I think exploring different motives and different means are really interesting with that topic, especially, of course, in the coronavirus setting.
Yeah, there's a lot you can do with the setting of a pandemic.
Oh yeah, I remember seeing all over, you know, Twitter and Facebook right when the pandemic started, like, oh my gosh, we're going to get so much coronavirus literature of people being trapped and quarantined together.
Well, and there has been a lot of people that I've talked to have gotten a lot of their writing done because of COVID, because of being,
Mm-hmm.
out of work and whatnot. But they're not writing about COVID. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like their escape. They want
Mm-hmm.
away from it. But you can also use it in your novels to be able to give you a baseline of chaos in order to
Mm-hmm.
build off of that. I mean, I think grab inspiration wherever you can.
Oh, absolutely. And something that I'm really interested in exploring is, or I guess something I'm interested in finally being able to write about is, it's a lesbian fiction novel, as in the main romance that is going to take place in the novel is going to be between two women, which I'm
Mhm.
very excited about, because, as weird as it sounds, I've been bisexual, but I've been in the closet as a bisexual for a very long time. So only in the past couple years have I been, like, comfortably out, and it feels like, okay, now I feel like I can write this stuff and it won't be
Yeah.
suspicious, if that makes sense. Like, I can feel like I can write it, and if anyone questions it, they'll know.
And I think that's what a lot of writers do is they can get closure and they can work through things through their writing. And I think that, and by putting your writing out there when it's so personal to you, you really let a lot of people already like have have a window into your soul. Like they
Hmm.
can see what you're really like and stuff like that just by reading your writing. And I think that a lot of people really put their heart and their soul into their writing. So when you read anything by them, you can tell what their views are, which is
Hmm.
kind of the point of writing.
Oh,
But
absolutely. I
um,
remember in high school, I had signed up for this. It was like this online writing course. It was just via email. So you'd email back and forth with the instructor. And one of the questions that I had asked her, it was in like 10th grade, maybe. And I'd said, what is your advice for creating really great characters that people love, that people are super attached to? You know, those characters in TV shows and books that people absolutely adore. And her advice to me was, you need to learn to love the character outside of your book because it will shine through in your writing. And that's
mm,
stuck with me ever since, because it's get to know your characters outside of your book. And
yeah,
while you're writing, your writers will be able to tell that you know your character and that you love this character, which is, I
right.
think, amazing advice.
Absolutely, because you need to be able to see your characters as real people,
Oh, yeah.
and you know, and your readers can tell that if you have a what they call a flat character in your book, and you know it really doesn't matter what you do with them, then your reader's going to be able to tell. But if you have a well-rounded, well-developed character that has everything from hopes and dreams and flaws and everything else, and your reader can tell that, it makes a big difference, and
Oh,
it
yeah.
you can make your reader have an emotional attachment to your main character. That's what's really going to pull them in, and I think that's amazing. I mean, you definitely have to know your characters inside and out, and
Hmm.
that's yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So when you had first started with this story idea, did you, I know you did NaNoWriMo, but did you use an outline for it? Did you just kind of free write? How did you start the process?
So I do, in the NaNoWriMo process, they call it a planster, which is your kind of a mix of writing spontaneously on the spot versus having a brief outline, which is what I like to do for a lot of my books. I find that from time to time, I'll have like an image in my head of how I want a scene to play out, or how I want like a specific line that I want a character to say, or a specific conversation that I want to go a specific way. I'll write that down specifically in my notes, like this is a conversation I specifically want to have happen. But normally my notes are like, they go to the grocery store and this happens, and then they go here and this happens, and it's like, oh, remember to add in that this happens in this scene, and like those will be the notes I leave for myself. And it's fun because sometimes I'm in the mood to free write and to be able to take a scene that has almost no notes attached and just go for it. And there are some days where I want a really strict outline for a scene that I'm writing because it feels way easier to write those days. So I find that the kind of combination process really works for me, because I find it also still leaves for wiggle room if, as I'm writing the project and I find like, no, I actually feel like this character wouldn't do this anymore. I think it would be more like this. My schedule or my plan is loose enough that I'd be able to kind of flip those things around and adjust, if that makes sense.
Hmm. And what's interesting is that a lot of writers will either choose to free write or to use an outline for a book. But
Mm-hmm.
the way that you do it, you kind of mix it up depending on what scene you're working on. And I
Oh,
think
yeah.
that's interesting, because what I always want to stress to writers is that you don't have to follow one plan. You
Oh,
know, you don't
absolutely.
have to follow another writer's plan. You really have to make it your own. You know, no matter if you're outlining or you're free writing or you're doing a little bit of both, no matter what you're doing, if it works for you, you're doing it right.
Exactly.
That's a big thing that writers, especially new writers, need to keep in mind, is that you know they have a favorite author, and they look at what their author does and they try to follow their that writer's process, but it doesn't work for them and they get discouraged. Like, you have to be able to kind of play with different options and practice and experiment until you can find your own creative method for your writing process.
Oh yeah. So I'm in my very last semester of university right now, and I'm taking a class on Margaret Atwood's work, as I'm Canadian and she's a famous Canadian writer and poet. And one day, coincidentally on YouTube, I got an ad for her masterclass, like the course that you can pay for. And the ad, she had this specific quote that stuck with me because I thought she phrased it so beautifully. And it was like, the waste paper basket is your friend. If you're afraid to write, you're afraid of something, but it's just you in the page. You don't need to worry about anything. Like, if it doesn't work, just scrap it. There's no one judging you. And I thought that that was such great advice, because that's exactly it. It's writing is a very personal experience to everyone. And so because of that, it obviously takes time, which is the frustrating part. It takes time and trial and error to figure out what works best for you. But once you figure it out, then like you're in your groove, you find your flow.
Yeah, and I think with a lot of new writers, they always think that once they put something on paper, it has to be perfect and it's permanent. Like they think
Mm-hmm.
that their first draft is what's going to be published and what everybody's going to see. And I think that is the most common misconception when it comes to writing, because
Oh yeah.
really your rough draft is going to be rough. You may end up throwing half of it out. You may end up revising it 20 million times before it gets to the point of being ready for publication. But I think a lot of writers, even me included, when I first started writing, I thought that I had this idea in my head, but when I wrote it down, it had to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes a lot of practice to finally realize that you need to practice before you get to perfect. And the only way to
Mm-hmm.
practice is to write. You have to, just like you said, you have to get in that flow. You have to just get it out. You just have to start writing. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to include every single thing. If you get to a point where you know it needs something else, but you don't know what it is, put a star next to it and move on and just keep writing with what you know, what you have in your head. You know, it's a trial and error process. It really is. I mean,
Oh,
writing in
exactly.
itself is difficult. So it takes practice. It takes writing in order to be a better writer. And
Oh yeah.
I think that initial fear is what holds a lot of people back from writing in the first place. I mean, I think I read a quote somewhere that said like 80% of people want to write a book, but only 20% of people in the world will actually do it,
Oh yeah.
because it takes a lot of overcoming fear. It takes a lot of self-discipline. It takes a lot of creativity and practice and trial and error. It's a very long process. And I think the ones who are passionate about it and the ones who really want to have that their name on the front cover of a book, those are the people who are going to go through all of those steps and all of those processes in order to get there.
Oh, absolutely. And I absolutely agree with the sometimes you just gotta write, and sometimes it's gonna suck, and sometimes you just gotta go, right? It just fix it later. As weird as that sounds, sometimes when you're writing a book, if you write a scene and you go, that dialogue was horrible, sometimes you just gotta keep going until you get into your flow, and then you go, okay, now I know what I'm doing, and then you can go
Yep,
back and fix that later. It's all that's what the
exactly.
draft is for.
That is, I think that should be every single writer slogan is "I'll fix it later." Like that
Hmm.
needs to be a plaque on every writer's desk that just says "I'll
The
fix
only
it later."
time procrastination is allowed is then.
Only then, yes. You can't procrastinate to start. That's the worst thing you could do, is to procrastinate to start writing.
Oh, I know. And I absolutely get that too, because
Oh yeah,
right when you're starting a writing project, especially, it's so daunting. Every
it
single
is.
year when I start National Novel Writing Month, it's the first few days, even the first week is the hardest, because you're trying to lay the groundwork for this idea that's entirely in your head. But then as
Yep.
soon as you get something down there, then you have something to work with.
Yes, yes. You can't edit a blank page. You can't revise a blank page. You have to have something down in order to move forward. And
Yep.
again, it's a lot of overcoming that initial fear of looking at that blank page and saying, where do I start?
Exactly.
And that's where I think kind of even a basic outline helps in the very beginning, just to know, okay, who are my characters? What's my setting? You know, what's the major conflict that's going to happen, and maybe what's the ending. Some writers like to know the ending beforehand, some writers don't.
Oh
So
yeah. There was this book that I wrote. It would have been for 2018 National Novel Writing Month, and then I started posting it in 2019. It's this book called Sweet Charlotte. And as I was planning and writing it, even up until the point where I was like editing and posting the last chapter, it was things like, okay, I don't know what I want the relationship between my two main characters to be. As in, I'm not sure if I want the book to end with them having a romantic or a friendship, like relationship wise, a romantic
you're at
friend.
the last chapter and we still don't know how it ends. Like you gotta
Exactly. It's one of those things where it's kind of like, as I was writing the book and as I was approaching the end, it was kind of like, no, I'll wait and I'll see what feels the best when we get there. And even then, I originally had written the book as like, okay, let's have a romantic ending. Let's see how that feels. And then the more that I sat and thought about it, I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to go change it to a friendship and we'll see how that feels. Right. And it's just because that's the point. That's the point of a draft. You're allowed to go back and they're allowed to change it.
Yeah, and the best thing about endings is that if you know your characters, if you really know your characters, then when you get to the ending, it's like your characters kind of choose the ending for you, because
Mm-hmm.
you're really looking at the story through their point of view and seeing and saying, okay, what would my character do in this situation? And really being able to let the character write the ending.
Oh, absolutely. And that's one of the, I always like to describe it as escapism, right? That's one of the greatest parts about writing is as you're writing, you can entirely step into the shoes of a different person, see the world through their eyes, right? They can make decisions, they can have beliefs that are entirely different from your own.
Different,
But that's
yeah.
the point, right? It's you're writing from someone else's perspective. That's part of the challenge.
Yes, yes. And I love that. I mean, I love being able to explore a situation that I've never been in myself. I love being able to look at things from the opposite point of view of my own, and it really helps me have a better understanding of humanity as a whole, really, because everybody
Hmm.
has a different viewpoint, and you have to be able to understand that everybody looks at things differently.
Hmm.
And I think that as you write, you grow as a person. Not only does you
Absolutely.
grow as a writer, you grow as a person. The more you put yourself in other people's shoes or other characters' shoes, and look at things from different points of view.
Oh, absolutely. And especially now, I'm a believer of like the world needs compassion more than ever. So I always feel like that's a great way to do it. Put yourself in someone else's shoes, right? Writing is such a great way to explore that.
Oh, absolutely. Now, you are at a university, so do you have a specific place where you write that's a quiet place with no distractions, or what does your writing space kind of look like?
Yeah, it's super weird, of course, because COVID has changed up so much. My favorite places to write used to be, of course, on my university campus. I liked to write. Normally, it was between classes when I needed, as weird as this sounds, when I needed a brain break from writing essays or reading for class, I'd write and read for fun.
It's
The
different
writer way.
you like versus being forced to write something
Oh,
that
absolutely.
teacher picks for you.
Oh, yeah. And so now, of course, with COVID, it's been super interesting because, of course, this completely changes up my writing process because normally I like to go to different places to write because when I'm surrounded by other people who are busy, I feel more obligated to work. You know, I feel more eager to get work done because that's what I'm surrounded by. So, of course, being at home, where this is where I sleep and play games and spend time with people, it feels so weird to go. And it's also writing time. This is where we get all
Yep.
of our stuff done. So, I've been trying to, from time to time, move to different spots in the apartment. Like, oh, okay, I'll write at the kitchen table for a while. And then I'll move to the living room, then to my desk, and then to over here.
No, trust me, I understand that. I don't have a an office or anything, so if I want a quiet, uninterrupted space to write, it's my bedroom. But that's where I watch Netflix, and that's where I take naps. Like it's
Yeah,
not.
exactly.
You really have to put yourself in a completely different mindset in that case, in order to really focus on working on writing. And
Mhm.
it takes a totally different place to go in your mind when you can't go to a specific place. for real.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And that in itself is difficult because it takes a lot of self-discipline to be in the same room as your TV and not turn it on to watch Netflix, you know.
Oh yeah, exactly.
um so when it comes to your schedule, I mean, I don't know how COVID has affected your classes or anything like that, but when do you write? Like, do you have a specific time that you write every day, or do you just write when you have inspiration? What is your process like?
I try to make a habit of writing. I mean, I try to do it at least once a day, as in writing for fun. Even if it's like a sentence or two, I try to do something every day. I normally find that first thing in the morning or in the evening are the times that are best for me, because during the day, I'll be working, I'll be going to class, I'll be doing my homework and my readings. And then it's almost like that's how I'll end the day, is by rewarding myself by doing something that I find fun, or that's how I start the day, is rewarding myself with something I find fun. Of course, if I get to do both, that's a bonus because I get to start and end the day on it.
And I think that a lot of writers, especially in the beginning, they focus so much on, I want to be published, that they put a lot of pressure on themselves and they lose the art of it being fun in the first place. So
Mm-hmm.
instead of it being a fun activity that they do on the side, it becomes something that they focus all of their time on, which is fine. But when they do that and they put so much pressure on themselves, it's almost like they don't get any writing done because they're so stressed out about it, and it's counterintuitive. So
Oh yeah, exactly.
you have to remember that it is something that you do for fun. If it's something you like to do, you should have fun with it.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, that's also why I really like posting my works for free online, is because it reminds me of that, right? It kind of, while of course I'd like to publish a book someday, of course, it's this is reminding me that it's not actually about publishing. It's about writing, and it's about connecting with people. It's about sharing your work and having conversation. And the medium in which people access that, it doesn't really matter as long as you're able to have that connection with people. Because really, that's the point of all kinds of art, right? Especially
Right.
literature.
Absolutely. And again, I think it's amazing that you the way that you do it, the way that you post a chapter a day, because really, or a chapter a week, because you really get to connect with the readers. I mean, whether it's in a forum or in a comment, they can give you direct feedback, and they can also give you feedback as the story goes along.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than reading the entire book, and the feedback that they give at the end is really just a summary. Whereas if they're only reading one chapter at a time, they can give you detailed feedback on each
Hmm.
individual section. And I think that that can really help, especially in the revision process, because you're getting that direct feedback from readers, and it's specifically detailed for each chapter instead of just an overall summary at the end of the book where they've forgotten most of the details by that point.
Mm-hmm. And I find that the bonus to the process, right, is it gives you time to both edit and to write each week, right? It gives you a timeline of a week, which is a nice timeline. It's not too strict, but it's not too loose. It's okay. So it's kind of like if I put myself under a public deadline, if I'm procrastinating on editing it, knowing that you have a week to edit a thing, to post, it's like really good to kind of give myself that deadline because it pushes me to do it.
Yes. Yeah, trust me. And that's what made me think about doing something like the way that you do in the first place, because I'm like, I need deadlines. Like if I have no deadlines, if I have no short-term goal, I feel like I'm just kind of out there, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So
Oh,
whether
exactly.
even if I tell myself I'm going to write, 2,000 words a day, if I miss a day, like there's no repercussion for it. There's nothing that says, oh well, you didn't write 2,000 words a day, so now you're a day further away from your goal. Like there's no immediate feedback for it.
Oh,
So
yeah,
I think
exactly.
that the blog idea is such an amazing idea because it automatically gives you that deadline. It gives you people who are counting on you to to read it every single
Mm-hmm.
week.
Well,
And
and
I think
it's It's super funny too, because even if it's like one comment or one ask on the blog or whatever, where someone goes like, "Oh, I'm so sad that I missed the chapter this week if I wasn't able to post or if I announced that I couldn't post." If one person does that, it's like I need to be on it every other week now, because now it's like at least one other person other than me is counting on me, and I got to do it
Right.
for that one person.
Yep. But sometimes it takes that one person. I mean, I always say that
Oh yeah.
writing is the solo activity, but motivation isn't. And when it comes to writing and when it comes to meeting your goals, no matter what your goal is, you have to have a support system. You have to have somebody counting on you, somebody rooting you on, somebody who can give you that constructive criticism. And even if it's one person who does all of that, or you have a whole group of people who have different jobs and that different roles in that support system, you definitely need that support system no matter what.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree.
So what are your goals as a writer moving forward? You're about to leave university, so
Mhm.
what are your goals as a writer? Are you planning on publishing something soon, or?
So I'm actually really excited because the thesis that I'm working on at school right now, so I mean, fingers crossed with COVID and everything. Fingers crossed I graduate in April. And so come April, my thesis will be done. And my thesis is a collection of poetry, prose, and letters to my younger sister. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to add to that, expand on it a little more once I graduate, and then hopefully get that published. Because poetry is like my heart and soul, and poetry is what I've been doing since high school. And I feel
I'm with
like being able to do that first would feel so great, because of course I'd love to be able to publish a book one day, but being able to get like my poetry out into the world, which is so much of my heart, getting that out first feels the best. And also because that project is very dear to my heart, and having that be my first professional project out would be so great.
Yeah, no, trust me, I understand that. Poetry is my first love, and my overall plan is to self-publish my poetry collections first, and then once I revise my novels for like the millionth time, I will go with the traditional publisher for those. But I definitely want my poetry to be out there first, because
Mhm.
that's I think poetry in itself is very personal, because it
Mhm.
takes a lot of thought that goes into each and every line, and it takes a lot of heart that goes into it. I mean, you have obviously a lot of heart that goes into your novels too, but when it comes to your novels, you have other things that are in it. You have to
Mhm.
have themes, you have to have characters, you have to have what your characters viewpoints are and everything like that, whereas your poetry is, it's coming directly from your heart.
Exactly, exactly. And also, I cannot wait to buy that poetry book. The only exception I give all my writing friends is like, okay, I'm going to buy the book, but can I get it signed? Like, I'll buy it and then can I mail it to you to sign it and then give it back?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I have like three different collections that I'm working on.
Ooh, that'll be
That
so exciting.
Yeah, I know. It is. I'm really excited about it because poetry has always been my first love. I mean, I collect vintage books and I try to get as
Oh,
many
yeah.
poetry books as possible, because poetry in the 1800s is the same as what poetry is now, but I
hmm
love that poetry can stay the same all the way through those years, and it's amazing to me.
Oh, yeah. I literally have like one of my favorite poetry books ever. It's over on this bookshelf. It's like a vintage poetry book. I think it's like almost 100 years old, I think. And it's like in the very front of it is a message like, "This is to my sweetheart. I love you." And it's poems like for inspiration and joy. It's so cute. Like things like that are so great, because not only do poetry books, especially, have so much character, but over time, if you're able to pass them between people or write messages in them, like that is so special. Those are so
Oh, I
great.
love it. A lot of my vintage books in my collection have those little notes in the front of, to this person,
hmm
I love you, or happy birthday, or anything like that. I mean, any little note that they put in, it's amazing. It just makes everything that much more personal.
Right? Because then in the future, right? Like here's a poetry book that has an inscription that is not addressed to me. It's to two people I don't know. And I feel so sacred and special to have that. It feels so special because it's like I have a part of their story now. Like it's in my
Yeah,
bookshelf. That's so cool.
and it also makes you feel connected to the people who had that book before you.
Oh, absolutely. It's so great.
I do. I love that feeling.
Well, and then it's
Um,
great because it's like I could pass that down to other people in the future if I wanted. Keep it going.
mhm. Well, do you have any writing advice to any other writers out there that you want to put out?
I feel like, again, as we talked about, the best piece of writing advice is to just go for it. It's to just try, just write. Because sometimes you will be shocked if you just sit there and write, you wait a few days and you go back and read it. Sometimes you'll be like, this is really good. Like, I did way better than I thought. Sometimes, you know, you read something of yourself and you're like, wow, this author is so great. Oh, wait, it's me. That's how you should feel. That's how you should feel. Like, oh, right, I wrote this. It's like just writing, just get it out. I know it can be like iffy to have confidence in yourself to get it out, but just go for it. And of course, if you're ever interested in sharing your work with the world, writers are always interested in reading the work of other writers. I always try to tell people that writing is not a competition. It's
Right.
never like if someone buys one book, it's a competition because they're not buying yours. Like, no, everyone can buy everyone's books. So don't be worried about numbers. Don't be worried about any of that. There's
Right.
more than enough to go around. Everyone, there are people out there who want to read your work. So if you have it in
Yeah.
your head, just write it.
Absolutely. Yeah, trust me. I completely agree with the not competition parts. But I mean, I can't even tell you how many books I've read over the years and how many books are on my shelf right now that I still haven't read yet that I'm working towards.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, trust me, when people are readers and they like to read, they're going to read many, many, many books. Like it's not a
Oh yeah.
competition between writers at all. And I think that,
Reading is like one of the best pieces of writing advice you can give to
oh
people.
yeah.
Like just read, pick up books, read anything.
Yeah, I think you always make yourself a better writer by reading anything, especially if you're reading the same genre that you want to write in, because you really get a sense for the structure of the story and things like that, which should be your baseline before you start branching out and getting creative and everything like that. So yes,
Oh,
definitely.
absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much for meeting with me today. This will be up in just a few minutes, actually. So.
Awesome. I'm so excited. I'm going to share it around. I can't wait to share it around. So thanks again for inviting me. I'm going to poke more of my writer friends and send them your way.
Oh yeah,
So
absolutely.
check out her channel, talk to her.
Yes. Absolutely. Trust me. I want to get as many of these up here as possible because I have learned so much since I started doing these interviews. And I feel like any writer who watches these is going to learn just as much. And that's what I really want to do. I want to make sure that writers have all the information that they need in order to become a
Absolutely.
better writer as they go. They don't need to stick with just one person's process. They can, they really have to branch out and see that all writers are different and all writers follow a different process.
Oh, yeah. And I've always said from the beginning, I'm super thankful and blessed and privileged that I'm able to go to school. I'm able to go to post-secondary. I'm able to afford post-secondary. My parents helped me pay. I'm super blessed for that. But writing advice and resources should be accessible to everyone, regardless
Oh,
of income, regardless of anything. So I think that this is like a super great idea. It's super fun because I agree. It's like, you learn so much from even just talking to other writers. You learn so
exactly.
much from engaging with the community.
Right. I mean, I'm an English major and I learned a lot from school, but I also read books about writing. I also just read all kinds of books. But honestly, I think the most helpful thing that I have ever done for my writing process is do these interviews and be able to talk to other writers and see what everybody does and whatnot. I mean, it's been the most valuable thing to me as a writer so far.
Oh, absolutely. Social media is a great tool.
Yes. All righty. Well, thank you so much for talking with me today, and I hope you have a great day.
Yes, thank you again. You too.
All right. Bye.
Bye.